Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Fraser Jackson. Here are the stories making headlines across the continent this evening. A ceasefire comes into effect in Sudan. International onlookers hope the fragile 7-day truce will hold. But on the ground, just minutes after taking effect, sporadic firing was heard in Khartoum's twin cities. South Africa looks to overhaul its image around the war in Ukraine by participating in an African peace initiative being floated to the countries. We'll hear more from one of the men behind it. And gaining 2 million views on YouTube within 2 days can really help boost your market's potential. We'll meet the Beninese influencer who's going viral across French-speaking Africa. It's good to have you with us. Our top story, a Saudi and US-sponsored ceasefire is now in place in Sudan as efforts continue to de-escalate the violence in the country. Well, as the deadline approached, fighting still raged in the capital as the forces loyal to the country's two top generals continued to clash. Almost 1,000 people have been killed by the violence, with over 1 million displaced. As the first ceasefire signed by both the army and the RSF paramilitary, international observers had hoped that, unlike previous efforts, this 7-day truce would hold. But just minutes after the truce went into effect, sporadic fighting was heard in Khartoum's twin cities. France 24's regional correspondent Bastien Renouy has more for us.
Well, according to local sources, this ceasefire is not implemented at the moment. They say that they can still hear explosions in the cities of Omdurman and in the city of Bari. These are two cities located just a few meters away from Khartoum on the other bank of the Nile, where the fighting have been very intense this afternoon and during the past days. So these civilians located in Khartoum say that they can still hear explosions and gunshots. They had very little hope that a ceasefire could hold given the intensity of the fighting of the past few hours, of the past days, and it seems that they were right. At the moment the fighting continues. During the previous hours before this ceasefire, they said that they could still see warplanes in the sky bombing several parts of the city, that the rapid support forces were still hiding in civilian neighborhoods, they were still looting houses, they were still raping women, assaulting civilians, and in the meantime the army was still bombing the city where the rapid support forces are hiding. That's for the situation in Khartoum. And the situation is still dire in the region of Darfur as well. The city of Niala, as an example. There's been intense fighting in the city center during the past 3 days. And in the city of El Genina, located a few kilometers from the border with Chad in West Darfur, the rapid support forces and local militias are still surrounding the city. They've killed hundreds of civilians during the past week, according to local authorities. Civilians are still stranded in the city. They cannot escape, and it's the same situation in Khartoum, where millions of people are still stranded while the fighting continues.
The UN's representative to Sudan has warned against the ethnicization of the conflict, saying that if the ceasefire isn't upheld, the fighting could split the country along ethnic lines, which could prolong bloodshed and impact the wider region. Volker Perthes told the UN Security Council that in parts of the country, fighting between the two armies has sharpened into communal tensions or triggered conflict between communities. Moving to other news, after weeks of headlines accusing South Africa of having shady dealings with the Kremlin, President Ramaphosa's government is looking to boost its officially neutral stance by partaking in an African delegation that hopes to broker peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. Representatives from 6 countries, including Senegal and Egypt, are set to float the plan to both parties, which hopes to open peace talks even as Russian troops remain on the ground in Ukraine, something President Zelensky had ruled out. Let's hear from Jean-Yves Olivier, who's helping form the African Initiative.
Despite what has been said, President Ramaphosa is in no way the leader of this peace mission. There is no leader. As for President Zelensky, he had never been in contact with President Ramaphosa. He was unable to do so. South Africa had alienated Ukraine since the beginning of the war. So it was very important to renew relations between Ukraine and South Africa.
The ruling party in Mauritania scored a comfortable victory in last week's legislative and local elections, according to official results published on Sunday. The vote being seen as a litmus test for the veteran head of state ahead of next year's presidential poll. The elections were the first since 2019, when President Ghazouani came to power. The opposition, meanwhile, has cried foul. For more on this, we go to Sam Bradpiece in Dakar.
The results of these elections in Mauritania were no real surprise. Not since the advent of multi-party democracy in the country in 1991 has the president failed to command a significant majority in the country's legislature. The ruling El Insaf party and its allies won a total of 116 out of 176 seats up for grabs. The opposition have cried foul play, alleging massive fraud, and noting that one of the main opposition parties, led by a prominent anti-slavery activist, was banned from taking part in the elections altogether. Many analysts believe that these most recent results will embolden the president to run for a second term in office at next year's presidential election.
Clashes between herders and farmers in rural Nigeria have killed over 100 people in the last few days. Gunmen have stormed villages and burned houses, allegedly in retaliation for farmers killing a herder and his cattle after straying into their territory last month. Ethnic regional tensions have claimed hundreds of lives in recent years. The conflict between Muslim herders and Christian farmers has been exacerbated by the growth of the agricultural industry and the devastating effects of climate change. Olivia Bizot has more.
Gunshots in Mangu district as assailants stormed villages and burned houses. More than 100 people were killed in the violence last week alone.
Every houses were set ablaze, and all their grains were all burned. Houses were burned, properties were destroyed. There was looting. We saw them. We even saw the machineries, the attackers.
The attacks were in reprisal for farmers killing a herder and his cattle earlier this month. Local security forces say that calm has been restored, but several villages are still struggling with tensions. It's part of a deadly rivalry that's been going on for years between local farmers, who are mostly Christian, and herders, who are mostly Muslim. It began as a battle for land and water. Climate change and desertification has pushed the nomadic herders into southern Nigeria in search for land for grazing. That's put them at odds with locals. Tit-for-tat attacks have seen the conflict escalate.
People come in a large number, so we don't have weapons that will defend ourselves. Only we have catapult and machete.
Last week, more than 3,000 people were displaced because of the violence, and hundreds of homes were destroyed.
Well, staying in Nigeria, outgoing President Buhari opened what's being billed as Africa's largest oil refinery on Monday after years of delays. Despite being Africa's biggest oil producer, poorly maintained infrastructure operating below capacity meant that the country had to import around 33 million litres of petrol a day. Well, the new refinery aims to produce 55 million a day, exporting the surplus for profit. The plant also houses a power station, seaport and fertilizer unit, but at a cost of $19 billion. It hasn't come cheap and is at least $5 billion over initial estimates. Well, the power of the internet is truly an incredible thing, and one Beninese influencer found that out when they amassed nearly 2 million views on YouTube within 48 hours and found themselves a viral sensation across French-speaking Africa, all thanks to their humorous parodies. Our team went to meet him.
Just hours before his return to France, Axel Merrill's popularity has taken off in Cotonou.
J'aime bien ses sketchs, je le trouve super drôle, il est très charismatique.
C'est une fierté pour le pays actuellement.
Le fait qu'il y ait plusieurs millions de vues, en fait, ça montre vraiment que les gens l'aiment, quoi.
Just a few days earlier, the Beninese online comedian and singer released a music video that went viral. It racked up 2 million views in 48 hours without any promotion. The song is dedicated to the daughter of the renowned Ivorian pastor, Camille Makosso. The project has even seen Axel collaborate with the famous comedian Michel Gou.
I'm very surprised. Everything happened so quickly, but I was kind of confident because the project was good.
Axel's success is not a fluke. He's doing a master's degree in digital art and has carefully plotted his path for over a decade.
I was already trying to establish myself by doing parodies. It helped me gain a certain level of recognition. It just took a small spark to make people realize that I'm also deeply passionate about music.
With comedy, dance, music and films, Axel Merrill entertains his 4 million subscribers on TikTok. He says US actor Will Smith is his role model. Since the video's release, Axel can now charge up to 5,000 euros per post, tripling his market value.
He strategically and effectively rallies his community around the project. As long as he continues to nurture this relationship with his community, his popularity will keep rising. The more his influence grows, the more valuable he becomes.
Since his viral video, major commercial brands in Europe and Africa have shown interest in collaborations. Influencers like Axel help brands target specific audiences that traditional media struggle to reach.
Well, that's it from us at Eye on Africa, but stay tuned to France 24. More news coming up next.